I heard that the song was in some ways inspired by being on acid and listening to Céline Dion. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me that story?
I was on a road trip with some friends in Italy and heard this Céline Dion song, a very early deep cut. It was En Amour.
Oh, yeah. En Amour, that's the song?
En Amour.
Yeah. Jam. I can't believe I'm starting the interview like this because I almost never do. But can I talk about your album title?
Yeah, of course.
Desire, I Want to Turn Into You. It's very compelling, and there's a lot of different interpretations. I was thinking about it a lot of different ways, so I figured I might just ask you. Talk to me a little bit about the title and where it came from.
I mean, the title is tonal. It's a ridiculous phrase, isn't it? Desire, I want to turn into you. Like, who is the you? Is the you desire?
Yeah.
Do you want to turn into desire itself? That's a bit of a paradox, right? Desire is like electricity. It's like the physical force that moves us through the world. That it's like the force of our will. But then there's maybe the you is the subject of your desire. Desire, I want to turn into you. Like this person that you desire, you want to become. Which is like extremely kind of creepy and manic, but also kind of real, right? Like when you're falling in love with someone, there's just no limit to how close you want to be to them, like how many of their memories you want to download, you know? And then there's a very like sweet kind of third meaning to it.
I want to turn into you.
I want to be held. So
yeah.
I like to think that all the songs on the album sort of sit right somewhere in that Bermuda Triangle of those three interpretations.
Well, I thought we could do is we go through every single song on the album. You tell me which one belongs to the I'm only joking. But I thought we could listen to one of a couple of songs off the record. Let's start out with this one.
Welcome to my island. Hope you like me. You ain't leaving.
That is Welcome to My Island off of Caroline Polachek's latest album, which you can hear the name of right there. So my understanding is that song was for your album before this. You've written that song for Pang, the album before this. Am I right about that?
I mean, I wrote it during that moment in time, yeah. Sometimes, I write songs and they don't come out for quite a long time. They need to sit in the cooker and find where they belong. But Welcome to My Island, when I wrote that song, it was very clear that it was for something else. It has this kind of brattiness, this like stupidity, and also this kind of code switchiness to it that felt kind of emblematic of a new chapter, a new era.
For you?
For me, yeah. Because the record, my last record, which was called Pang, was a very narrative record, a very sincere one.
Well, pang being a heart pang, being...
Yeah, the kind of twinge feeling in the gut that you feel. And that record was, again, very narrative, very beautiful, very, very kind of storybook. And this song, just in all its sort of brash brattiness, felt like it, and also in its abstraction. It's not giving you any story. No. It's refusing narrative. It's just almost like a series of logos or something that are stitched together loosely. And that felt like, the beginning of something new.
Refusing narrative.
Yeah.
Meaning that, hey, I'm intentionally going to, the last record was perhaps more narrative based. It was around love or loss or whatever. But I'm intentionally going to lean into a sort of deconstructed lack of narrative.
That we're not telling a story, that it's closer to collage.
Yeah.
Or poetry or montage.
Yeah, I think my best experience of listening to your record, and I know this might be a strange thing to say, was when I stopped trying to figure it out.
That's the thing. I think, we force these very kind of, these very logical ideas on a form like art that's not meant to be that way. So it's like I'm trying to poke people a bit back the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me, I remember when I first started getting into this job, I didn't know shag all about visual art. And, because I came from folk music and,
cool.
So I was spending a lot more time with like pottery. As a joke, but you know what I mean? Like I was spending a lot more time with the loom. And I remember going to the Art Gallery of Ontario just down the street there. And I said to my friend, like, I keep on looking at these things and I don't get it and I don't understand it. And she said, well, just stop trying. Like, just look at the piece and acknowledge how it makes you feel. And that's it. That's it. Acknowledge in the moment how it makes you feel and then just move on. I found your record was more fulsome to me when I was just able to do that.
Well, that's what living feels like, right? It's like this sequence of feelings And it's not always there's not always a conclusion. There's not always a moral to the story. It's like weather.
Yeah, there's not always a Genius website where you can click on the lyric and find out.
Yeah, there's not always like a code to decode.
Yeah.
And I think that's more beautiful and mysterious anyway.
There is a story related to a song on the record that I, as a Canadian in particular, was really interested in. Can we take a listen to the next song?
I don't know, but I believe we'll get another day together.
It's really beautiful. That's, I Believe, from Caroline Polachek. I love the orchestra hits, by the way.
Thank you.
I remember playing Mario Paint when I was a kid, and they had like a music software, and you could choose orchestra hits. Like this kind of like very 80s.
Oh, yeah. Orchestra hits are almost a bit of a joke to musicians in the studio because it's such a referential sound. You know, we hear it in a lot of like very early hip hop, Miami freestyle, a lot of like, you know, quite early club music. And it's kind of a sound that people don't really touch with the 10-foot pole now because
Yeah.
they're so funny. And, you know, it's that sound, like you said, on every kind of cheap keyboard preset, you'll see the orchestra hit.
Yeah.
And I kind of love almost the tabooness of that sound and how loaded it is with drama. And so I kind of wanted to challenge myself and see if I could use it in a completely unironic way.
I heard that the song was in some ways inspired by, again, this is the Canadian in me, like being on acid and listening to Céline Dion.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me that story?
I was on a road trip with some friends in Italy and heard this Céline Dion song, a very early deep cut. It was En Amour.
Oh, yeah. En Amour, that's the song?
En Amour!
Yeah. Jam.
Oh, I mean,
Huge.
also the chord changes in that song are amazing. But hearing that song, I just kind of visualized her voice as this sort of white sailboat that was just chopping through the ocean, like so purely and so victoriously. And I was like moved to tears by hearing it. And I kind of wanted to, when I returned to the studio afterwards, I kind of wanted to try my hand at that kind of quite open-hearted, you know, throwing everything to the wind kind of diva vocal style. And I Believe definitely came out of that train of thought.
So if I understand correctly, like there is, as opposed to like feeling this sort of like restraint in the studio or feeling maybe like a coolness in your expression, when you heard Céline, you heard this sort of like massiveness, this sort of like unfiltered power in her expression, in her music, and you were like, how can I get some of that in me?
It's like, yeah, it was almost, rather than letting go of any sense of restraint, it was like reaching towards something new, reaching towards, I guess, past any conception of cool and towards this, I guess, like total expression of heart. Yeah.
Past any expression of cool.
Yeah. Like it's not dealing with, I don't know, coolness or even, I don't know, even like the trappings of aesthetics. It's just, whoosh, it's YOLO.
Is that is that freeing to you?
Of course, yeah.
To get to, did you feel constrained by coolness beforehand? Is that something you had to get past?
I mean, you keep forcing me to have constraint on me. What is this? I never felt constrained.
No, I don't know. I mean, most people tell me that it's when they allow boxes to go around themselves is when they start.
I
to
find
feel,
limits extremely inspiring.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm putting the idea of constraint
Yeah.
around you. Because I think anytime you're sort of writing in a medium that has, you know, a time limit associated with it, a genre associated with it, these are limits
I don't
that we
think about
impose.
genre.
Well, who does anymore? I mean, I think the genre is sort of something that came up in our older time when we had to buy records based on like rock or jazz or something like that. I mean,
I think it's invented by radio stations ultimately.
yeah. But now that we have Spotify and now that we have,
Spotify is just as guilty.
you think so?
I think Spotify invented the term hyperpop, which didn't even really exist before.
What is that?
Hyperpop is this term that gets used to describe actually a lot of the work of my collaborators, especially people associated with the British music collective called PC Music, that a lot of my producer collaborators work with. Spotify just invented a name of a genre to loosely assemble a lot of the social scene into, even when a lot of people's music had nothing to do with each other formally or sonically. And I sometimes get lumped in with that too, which I find quite curious, that a name was given to actually people who are just in communication with each other rather than have anything to have anything sonic in common.
Why do you think they do it?
I think, because genre is cultural as well as being sonic, and I think Spotify wanted to sell that a bit.
I mean, there's something freeing about that. I mean, what I was referring to was that, when I was a younger music listener, I would have to go to the record store and look at the folk
Totally.
section or look at the rock section or the pop section. But now I can kind of listen to whatever I want. And I've often wondered, like, what is the result of that for people like my nephew, who's like 17 and has never had to subscribe to a genre. And I find it really interesting that you, as an artist, because I think there were people up until now that are like, oh, I'm in a punk band, I'm in a pop band, I'm in a folk band. I find it really interesting when you look at me, you say, I don't give a shit about genre at all.
Yeah, I'm much more, I guess, invested in I guess more interested in like the tribalism of culture rather than in like these sonic categorizations. Especially when I'm making my own music, I never think about genre. I just kind of chase after the feelings that I'm into, especially ones that I feel like aren't touched on so much. I get quite curious about that.
Or a lot of different artists, ultimately that would be what would be driving their creation, rather than I want to make a rock song or I want to make a jazz song. There's something deeper inside of them that they're trying to access.
Yeah, 100%. And then there's ego, of course. Ego is like the biggest driver of everything.
Yeah, I mean, understandably so. How were your songs when you first started writing songs?
Very private. No one heard them.
How old were you?
I guess I probably, I was younger than I realized I was. I was recently going through some old papers and stuff at my mom's house, and I found songs that I'd started writing around like age 12.
No way.
Yeah. Just scrawlings of them with, really crudely written musical notation. I didn't start performing songs for anyone until I was in college, where I started a band called Chairlift, where we were playing at, friends' garage parties or coffee shops for 5 people kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then very slowly Chairlift turned into my life.
Were those early songs you wanting to be a songwriter? Was that something you were looking into wanting to be?
If you're asking, like, did I have professional aspirations? That was like peak MTV VH1 era. And I remember just seeing these stories of these accounts of people getting signed in these various ways, like, hearing some kind of urban legend that like Sade got signed because she was singing at a gas station and someone overheard her. And I remember just, that era of the 90s feeling like the music industry was this mafia, this really mysterious mafia. There was no logical way to enter it. I'd sing in choir in school, but I was like, what link could choir ever have to the world of pop music? Like, there's no way one would ever connect me to the other. And this was before, we had the tools, GarageBand is on every computer.
Yeah.
Anyone can upload anything to Spotify directly themselves without a label.
The great democratization of
100%.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going to Guitar Center and seeing Cakewalk, the software,
Yeah.
behind a glass vitrine, and it was like, very expensive. And I was in high school and looking at it and being like, whoa, that's what you have to buy and learn how to use if you want to be a real musician. Anyway. I didn't have aspirations to be a professional musician. But,
Right.
But I do now.
Yeah. What were the early songs about, Caroline?
Oh, boys.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's sweet, though. That's nice.
Of course.
When you revisited them, was there any part of you who were like, oh, these are pretty good?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, right. You never know the beginner's mind and the
Of
purity of
course,
expression and all that kind of
course,
stuff.
Yeah.
So when the band takes off, how was the experience of being behind the curtain compared to what you thought behind the curtain was?
The curtain's changed. It's a very different curtain now.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there was another world over there of what does choir have to do with the music industry? The music industry could
Exactly.
be anything else. But you did enter it with Chairlift. Like what was it like to sort of enter that world you had sort of romanticized or had thought about?
Well, I guess that's what I mean by the curtains change is that at the time, we were signed at Columbia Records very fast off the back of a demo of ours that was used in an iPod commercial. And that came out before we were able to release any other music. So suddenly there was like a feeding frenzy over a recording contract. And then we were on the road for about a year and a half. with like very little prior experience, and it really just looked like a lot of touring. We were opening for Phoenix, we were opening for Gautier, we were opening for James Blake. It was like endless touring, and that was what the music industry looked like to me at the time, was just playing live forever. Whereas now it's so right here. It's like that's your access point to everyone.
Your
And so
phone.
the phone. And of course, I'm on tour right now, I'm playing live, but sometimes it feels quite surreal. Like it feels like the live shows now are actually more private experiences than they used to be relatively, because, everyone there, including me, is going to be posting content from it. And that will potentially be seen by more people than are actually in the room. But there's something very special and very indescribable that's happening in the room, which to me makes it feel more private than it's ever felt. But yeah, the industry is changing so fast with streaming and the amount of visual content that artists are expected to be making constantly.
Right, because your band would have been sort of the last of that older model. You get a big song, it does well, you tour until the wheels come off your bus and you sell a bunch of CDs.
But also in some ways, we were kind of the beginning of the new model as well. Like we were so interested in visual presentation in some ways. We were nominated for a VMA because we made the first music video to ever use this thing called data moshing.
Data moshing?
It's this really cool technique where you, in the way video information gets encoded, there's like pixel information and then there's movement information, right? The rate of change of pixel information. And you can separate those two layers of data and impose it on another piece of video, which means that you can make one piece of footage kind of move like another piece of footage in this really uncanny way.
Yeah.
And there was actually a mini arms race because the team of genius nerd friends of ours that developed an easy way of doing this split in two. There was a schism in the nerd squad, and half of them started working on a video for Kanye, and half of them started working on a video for us.
Oh, wow.
And our video came out like a week prior, and Kanye got really angry online and like posted about that, like someone else had beaten him to the punch on data moshing. I met him like a year later at a party and introduced myself as Caroline from Chairlift, the other band that did the data moshing, and he like left the conversation immediately on the spot because he was still bitter about that.
No way.
But anyway, that we were very playful with media still, and like our MySpace was kind of how we built a following as well. We were very playful with like the HTML and the design of the MySpace. So I think again that kind of visual presentation felt very new at the time, but is like status quo now.
When the band ended, or when you left the band, or when you started on your own thing, was the intention to start your own thing?
Chairlift broke up in 2016, and 2019 my first solo album came out.
How did it feel to make music on your own?
Daunting at first,
Yeah.
because I was in my 30s. First of all, starting out on a new project as a woman in the pop industry felt kind of unprecedented, or at least in terms of it being successful. And I also wanted to do something that was so completely unlike Chairlift that I thought that my pre-existing audience wouldn't ride with me. And I was also dropped by my label 5 weeks out from releasing Pang. And it was secretly the best thing that ever happened to me.
Why?
Because now I'm fully independent and I get to call the shots. And I ultimately think that campaign worked because I was the one holding the purse strings and not someone else. And because I could decide this is a single, this is not a single. These are the order of gestures. And it made it way more meaningful than if an A&R who was focused on stats, who was focused on recouping expenses was making those calls. And I could feel the immediate response. I think people could feel a sense of soul in the whole way that the campaign was conducted. And the cool thing was I learned that reads, that I can trust my audience and people in general, listeners in general, to feel these things.
Talk to me about getting Dido on the record. I loved having Dido on the record.
I still can't believe that happened. I still can't believe my record has Dido on it.
I should say Dido's on the record on the song "Fly to You" with Grimes.
Dido, Grimes, and I do a trio ballad, and it's like a rave breakbeat ballad, which I love so much. It's a song called "Fly to You," and I started that song with Grimes, and it's the first time I'd ever invited anyone onto a feature on any song I've ever made. I've done a bunch of features, but I've never opened up any of my own songs to features. And when Grimes and I made it, I got both of us got kind of high on the fact of us having done something together, and we're so excited about it. People aren't going to see this coming. This is going to be so much fun. And then I was like, wait a minute, what if we added one more voice to it? And we started thinking about people, and Dido was such a long shot. She's so private and so mysterious, and but I wrote her a letter and took a picture of it and sent it to her, and then a couple days later was on FaceTime with her, and she was like so sweet, so funny. She loved the song. She was in LA. I was in LA. 2 days later, I was at her house recording her on my home setup. I just brought all my gear from home, set it up on her lawn.
On her lawn?
She wanted to work outside, so I'd never done that before in my life. So we set up outside with my monitors and everything, and sat there just singing out into the open air, writing her part together. And then when it was written, we trailed a cable into her living room because she has a cat flap in her door for a cat to come in and out of. She trailed the cable through the cat flap and sang from her living room where I recorded outside in the sunlight, and it was just so special. I
can imagine just hoping that no one started mowing the lawn during the...
No, remarkably, no. We got lucky. No helicopters, no Dido paparazzi. I think the biggest obstacle was my trembling, because I was so scared to engineer a voice like that. This like precious voice.
Why is this? Why can I tell this was so meaningful to you?
Why? You tell me.
I don't know. Well, why? I can tell this was so meaningful to you. Why do you think this was so meaningful to you?
It felt, Dido for me was always sort of, as a kid, this kind of God-level voice, completely idiosyncratic, recognizable, so comforting, such a kind of healing presence on the radio and in culture, and also so doing a thing that I think at the essence I'm also doing, which is combining a very kind of vocal technique that's quite rooted in folk music with very forward-thinking electronic production. And so it kind of felt like a kind of, I don't know, intergenerational handshake or something. And I felt, it was a very big deal for me to be there with her.
I just had a thought now. Maybe this is a good way to close things off. And it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for coming.
You too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's nice having you. I had sort of parameters I wanted to place on you for the song. I wanted you to, we like to end things off with people picking a song off the record. And I had some like parameters, cerebral parameters I was going to go with. But after sort of having a great chat with you, I just thought maybe I'd leave it to you. Is there a song on the record that you wish had gotten a bit more love?
My favorite song on the album is track 2, Pretty Impossible. It's my favorite song on the album because it's complete stream of consciousness. There's no verses, there's no choruses. I just enter the song and flow, which again was going back to that Céline Dion vision of this being this sailboat that's just surfing through these choppy seas. That's kind of how I wanted this song to feel, was almost the way it feels to walk down the street when you're just spacing out, and different things that you see pass you by and kind of send you on different little thought tangents, then you're snapped into the next one. I wanted to make a piece of music that felt like that, so this is Pretty Impossible.
Hey, lovely to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
Lovely to meet you too. Thank you so much.